We've got a very interesting Subway Series. And yes, I actually mean that. It's an interesting Subway Series because of the way these two teams are trending and what has gone on over the last couple of days. Obviously, the Mets playing better baseball than the Yankees right now in this moment. And the Yankees facing some adversity injury-wise with Giancarlo Stanton being out for a month, maybe longer than a month. And the Mets a little bit of adversity with Edwin Diaz being out 10 days with the sticky stuff suspension. But you've got pitching matchups here, and I know that Garrett Cole is on a pitch count, and they're being careful with him. But you've got pitching matchups here that are in major favor of the Yankees if Luis Gil comes out and looks like himself again. So I still expect this to be probably, I'm leaning more Yankees in this series. But if there's any chance of the Mets to gain more momentum and continue to build, this is the perfect team at the perfect time to do it. And we understand these are just regular season games. They don't mean more. The fans are into it. We're always going to be into it, even though this has been going on now for almost, 30 years, the Subway Series, 27 years of the Subway Series. But the Mets are on this trajectory where they're getting back into it. They're getting back into the conversation. And if they won both against the Yankees, then at that point, and get back to 500 because they're 2 games under, then I think you start taking the Mets seriously again.
Well, I mean, I've started taking them seriously just from the standpoint of the way they've played the game. They've hit the ball, they've pitched well, they've closed games out. The Diaz thing is a punch in the face for sure for the next 10 days. And then when you look at the standings and you look at the loss column, 39 right now. If you look at the loss column, they're third in the wild card race. I know they're a game and a half out because they haven't played a couple of games. Or they got games in hand, but they've played really good. What is it? 13-4 in their last 17 here in June. It's amazing. It really is amazing if you go back 1 month, just 1 month to where these two teams were going. And again, this can change like that, and the Mets could. Would you be stunned if I told you the Mets lost their next 5 games?
No, and I would expect that more so than them winning their next 5 games.
So you just don't know. But I agree with you. These 2 games, and the 75 pitch thing from Cole, I don't like the quote that's out there in terms of, he's not all the way back. Last time I checked, 75 pitches for a guy like Garrett Cole should be good enough to get you through 6 innings.
Yeah.
If Garrett Cole went out there and threw, 2-hit ball for 6 innings and turned over a 3-0 lead to the bullpen, I think you'd have some pretty good juice and you feel good about it. That quote kind of stinks. But that having been said, the pitching matchup is in the Yankees' favor, I would think, over the next couple of days. But the two teams have a different feel right now. And this is where if the Mets came out, I think either way for both teams, to be quite fair, a split's fine. And if either team won both, things would be much better in their favor. But I just think for the Mets catching the Yankees right now, they have an opportunity to continue to build on what they've done. Because the one thing they really haven't done over this stretch of games, I don't know if you agree or not, is the teams they've played have been okay. They've beaten who they have to beat. Chicago's okay. I'm not saying they're not. But they haven't done well against the Dodgers. They haven't done well against Cleveland when they had an opportunity. I'd like to see them go out there and give the Yankees a fight. And conversely, the Yankees need to right themselves.
Yeah, and the Yankees, this is something that's been well documented, don't have a great record against some of the better teams in baseball either. But this has been a slow climb, and it's something we said yesterday. It's amazing how well the Mets have played in June. They still have the best record in baseball in June, and they're still 2 games under 500. Yep. So that's how hard it is to climb back when you dig yourself that deep of a hole early on in the season in April and May. So it's one thing to get back to 500. It's another thing to get back to 500, do it in a calendar month, and then also get back by sweeping the Yankees at home in the Subway Series.
Win me 82 games. Game Mets.
Yeah. I mean, this would go a long way in doing it. And I sit here today still not a believer. I have not been converted back into a believer. I said that once they dip below 500, we wouldn't see it again. So I'm getting very, very close to being wrong on that. But this may be, even though the Subway Series gets overblown for what it is, this is one of those not quite mid-season, but turning points for the Mets where if they end up splitting, it'll be fine. But if they lose 2 and then drop 2 of 4 games under 500 and lose 2 to the Yankees and the Edwin Diaz suspension, you feel like crap about him again. Or, I mean, this is a huge pendulum swing back to 500 and beating them. But then we'll probably get a split, and then we won't have any answers.
Maybe
we'll
not.
Keep trugging along to the end of the season.
I do agree with you, though. I would say their next 10 to 12 games is their season from this standpoint. I've always thought, and, who's right, who's wrong, whatever. We'll find out at the end of the year. But I've always believed this is a 500 team. They ain't great. They ain't terrible. They're a middling team. And I thought if they would play that type of baseball, then we would see what the owner would do at the trade deadline. If they were a bad team and weren't playing well like they were, there's no doubt that they're going to sit there and start selling off pieces. This next 10 to 12 days, I would think for the Mets is going to tell us a lot in the direction they take the rest of the season. Are we going to put more money in? Or are we going to look to add? Or are we going to start the tear down in terms of continuing to build up the farm system and looking more towards the future? Are we trading Pete Alonso to see what we can get back for him? Will we try to make other moves in terms of shedding salary and payroll, or are we going to add payroll and players? That, to me, it's not these next 2 games, although very important. I think the next week to 2 weeks will tell you everything you need to know.
And that's, I think, where our fundamental disagreement on this team comes from, is you think that if they're within striking distance, that Steve Cohen and David Stearns are going to go out and improve the team, because David Stearns he's here. He wants to have a winning team. And in his first year, Steve Cohen is someone who wants to win, is desperate to win, has the resources to win. But he's been saying for a better part of a year now that this season was a rebuild season. And they have shown that with the moves that they have made. So to me, they've got to be significantly in the hunt and playing great baseball for them to add. And even if they do add, I think it'll be minor adds, because the 2 ways that you add at the trade deadline is you take on salary or you trade prospects. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Steve Cohen and David Stearns are interested in doing either one of those things at this point in the rebuild. And this is something that is clearly in the heads of the players. And I know you're on vacation. I don't expect you to have listened to the Francisco Lindor, Scott Van Pelt interview, as Scott Van Pelt's been a big theme so far this morning. Not the warm-up show in here. But it was after Sunday Night Baseball, and Scott Van Pelt interviewed Francisco Lindor. And Francisco Lindor, not prompted, he was just asked about the optimism for the rest of the team, mentioned the trade deadline. He goes, we just have to keep playing, keep being optimistic, 27 outs every single day, and then we'll see what management wants to do at the trade deadline. So that's in the clubhouse. And Boomer seems to think that was something that was said during that team meeting. Like, you guys like playing with each other? You want to be around? Because they're this close to blowing this entire thing up.
Well, I didn't see that, but I saw the Brandon Nimmo comments from last week talking about how we like Pete Alonso. We need Pete Alonso. Yeah. We know what's coming up. If we want him here. I saw Harrison Bader talking about the trade deadline. So there's no question that's permeated throughout the clubhouse. I agree with your premise on giving up prospects for sure. I do disagree with the idea of taking on a soon-to-be free agent, and I don't know what the list is, but in terms of a guy that's on a contract year or maybe has a year and a half left, I don't think that they wouldn't make a move because of that if they believe you can make a run at something. Right now, they're a game and a half out of the 3rd wild card spot and would be 3rd in the loss column. So they are relevant right now. They have to continue to show it. Unfortunately, if you're a Met fan right now and you like this team, on June 25th, you're not relevant enough. You're not close enough to the trade deadline. You have to be in this realm right now around the trade deadline and believe that your team can make a little bit of a run. The Diamondbacks did it last year. The Phillies a couple of years ago. There is example after example after example. And I do think that they would put more money into this team. I just feel like Steve Cohen, while yes, rebuilding, he has also said numerous times he believes this is a playoff team. Well, you got to go prove it then.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely said that publicly, but he also thought he was sending a DM to some whatever podcast or Met blog or something when he wrote that thing on X where he said, essentially, there's nothing we could do about blowing up this team until the trade deadline. Now, that's when they were going really, really bad at that point, and maybe has a different opinion on it now. But
don't you think that they've blown it up to enough to the point where, I mean, they've brought in they've made trades and brought in a lot of young talent, and I play a lot of the clips from the Syracuse teams and all sorts of things like that. I think they've started to do a really good job of starting to build things back up. When you look at this team, like Alonso's an interesting one because me personally, I wouldn't trade him and I wouldn't do anything with him. I would let him play out the season. And it's a little different to me than John Tavares. A lot of people use that as an example because I don't think Pete Alonso grew up a Braves fan or whatever team you want to be. I think he wants to be here, whereas Tavares did, but was also a childhood Maple Leafs fan. What would you give Pete Alonso? Like, if a team came out and offered Pete Alonso $40 million a year, I'd say, see ya. Like,
Yeah, of
I
course.
wouldn't even think about re-signing him at that price.
And then I said to Boomer the other day, if there's one thing I could look into the future and know, if I could be a fly on the wall, it'd be how badly does David Stearns want to keep Pete Alonso? Like, what is his limit? And there were rumors out there about, I think, Joel Sherman and John Heyman put out some numbers in the contract that he had turned down. So is that like the term and the money that they were willing to go to? Like, how much further than that would they go? And that's the thing that I want to know or how many years as well. You got to remember, he's in his early 30s at this point. Is there a team crazy enough because they desperately want Pete Alonso to give him 8-9 years like the Aaron Judge contract, maybe not as much money, but as much term because it's Scott Boras and
Ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean,
ain't happening.
But but this is what it always seems to happen, though. It always seems like a desperate team out there ends up overpaying somebody. But then again, there's many examples of guys in their 30s who end up waiting around and never get that contract, sign a one-year deal.
JD Martinez, while older, I understand that, signed at the end of spring training. Blake Snell couldn't get a sniff.
Yeah.
Jordan Montgomery couldn't get a sniff. Now, what do those two guys have in common? The agent.
Boris clients. Yeah.
Right, who Alonso has gone to. And I'll tell you this, listen, he could hit 50 home runs from this point forward and hit 75 this year. Not happening, of course. My point is, given what he has done so far this year, and you look at the offer, if indeed that was made, yeah, it's about right. 5 years, 125, given what he has done, to me, that's actually an overpay.
Yeah.
Because he's been very disappointing this season.
Yeah, I still think so. Last year, it was, and I had this written down, but then I in my notes section, but then deleted it the other day. I was doing some cleaning up of my phone the other day, Jerry. I had to get some stuff out there. So when the Mets made the trade, when they traded away David Robertson last year, so it was like June 25th, somewhere around there, where it was like, July 25th, sorry, because the trade deadline was like August 1st. So it was like a week before the trade deadline. It was July 25th. They were 7 games under 500 and 4.5 out of a wild card. If they're in that same position, 4.5 out, 7 games under 500.
Oh, it's trading.
100% trading.
Absolutely trading.
How much better do they need to be than that to go for it?
I think you have to. I think it's the eye test. Do you look like a playoff team? Don't you look like a playoff team?
All right.
I would say 7 games under 500. You're not going anywhere. You're not a playoff team. I think they've done a very good job getting back to where they're at. And I think if they hover here, if you're within a game of 500 and you are within a game or two of that wild card spot, and if you like what you're seeing, the one thing about when they were losing games too, how many games did the bullpen blow? The lineup, when the lineup would be anemic, they'd pitch well. When they would pitch well, they wouldn't hit, and which is the mark of a bad team for sure, or a very average team. Now they've seemed to have put it together. Does this Diaz thing now crush them? Can they not close games out? Do they go tonight up 4-3 on the Yankees, and whoever that Drew Smith goes out there and blows chunks and the Yankees win, 7-4? I think you have to see it more so than just look at the numbers.
And remember, though, the clubhouse was not happy when that happened. I mean, and Max Scherzer's a jerk, but he said it. He goes, and all of a sudden we just, traded our closer. So I also think, they were coming off a big year the previous year. They were saying, we've got all this talent in this clubhouse. Maybe we could turn it on. So they were surprised at that point that trade was made when they were that bad. So I wonder what the mentality is going to be as they get closer and closer. But it remains to be seen. I think some of these tough questions, they answer themselves, don't they?
Next couple weeks, we'll know.